we got two great authors here, and this panel, Read Like a Local. I was delighted that they asked me to do this because my whole career, everything about me is really focusing on local, and everything we do. We did a documentary about Walter Anderson. He's part of my life. I grew up working on a shrimp boat in the summers, and I would read Walter Anderson books. So when I did my first feature documentary, I did it on something very special to me. Our latest film is Eudora Welty, and the companion book for that. And I got to sign pages with Eudora. We published this book ourselves to go along with the film. But when I was 18, I got to sign autographs on a poster I had done with Eudora Welty. And see, I designed this book also, and my wife made fun of me. She said, "Can you make your picture any larger in the book?" She said, "Maybe a fold-out page or something." But I said, "You designed your own book, and you can put your picture as big as you want." But the funny thing is, when I looked, all these years later, I looked at this picture, and when I blew it up, I realized Eudora has on a Walter Anderson sweatshirt print underneath there, and I had never noticed that. So my little worlds kind of collided. But that's what I love about Mississippi. We're all in this together. We all share the same loves and losses and challenges and joys. And these two gentlemen and the works that they do, and continuing telling Jackson's story, telling Mississippi's story through nonfiction, through fiction. So I'm very excited about this. So anyway, so let me introduce these guys to you. So Vincent Venturini. Vincent, a native of Jackson, Mississippi, and has degrees from Mississippi State, University of Southern Mississippi, University of Alabama. I mean, he's by far the smartest one up here, right, Darden? He's got all these degrees. He taught at Mississippi Valley State University 28 years and was the associate provost of the university, taught in post-retirement at JSU. Since he retired, he's gotten busy writing local histories. His first book, One Direction Home, A History of South Jackson, he covered downtown Jackson and West Jackson. And his second book, his newest one, is based on the diary kept by a teenage Jackson girl during the Battle of Jackson and the Siege of Jackson in 1863. And I enjoyed reading this. It's called Blackened Chimneys, Stand Monument of Yankee Glory. So you're going to need to check this out. I've got some good questions about this. Vince combines her story with local history to show the hardships young Belle endured. And he's also writing a history of social work in Mississippi. He works out of his home in Ridgeland. Y'all welcome Dr. Vince Venturini. Darden North. Darden's mysteries and thriller novels have been awarded nationally, receiving Ippy Awards in Southern Fiction for points of origin and party favors. His other novels include The Five Manners of Death. I love that title. Wiggle Room, Fresh Frozen, House Call, and his latest, Rooftop. He is no stranger to the Mississippi Book Festival. You've been a panelist, a moderator numerous times, so don't judge my moderating too closely, Darden. He has been chairman of the board of the Mississippi Public Broadcasting Foundation, an organization I'm very familiar with. He's a native of the Mississippi Delta. Darden is a magna cum laude. Okay, well, he's smart too, so I'm out here to kind of balance it out. He's a Hall of Fame graduate of Ole Miss. Pretty impressive. He practices gynecology and robotic surgery full-time at Jackson Healthcare for Women. He and his wife, Sally, enjoy their family, traveling and participating outdoor and community activities. And a tagline from his website, which I love, "Finally, a doctor whose writing you can read." Isn't that great? Y'all welcome Darden North. Okay, now the hard-hitting questions. Darden, let's start with you. Okay, so you minored in English at Ole Miss. Did you do any creative writing while you were there?
None other than to edit the yearbook in my senior year, the Ole Miss Annual. No.
All right, question number two.
If you can answer, answering biology, questions and chemistry stuff, that was pretty good. Doing chemistry.
One of the
Well,
best annuals at Ole Miss
that's a
ever
good
is the response there.
yes, that was really good.
That's great. North's stories are intense, well crafted, engaging, and fast paced. That's what one reviewer said. And I love this tagline from Rooftop. What kind of monster would murder his own sister? Y'all got to read this. I'm going to read a little passage in a little bit, and it's really, really cool. You've said before in different interviews that most doctors believe they can do anything. So here you are, a successful practice. You're living life well, and then you say, you know what? I want to work on this book. And then you worked on it for about, what, 10 years?
Right.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Well, the first book was House Call, and I did start it about 10 years prior to its being published. And we just had a very wonderful presentation about Greg Iles and his life. He was one of the early writers that I started to read and admired Mississippi authors, more contemporary authors. And I did decide I could do this, and my family did encourage me. And it didn't hurt that my mother was an English teacher, and so was my wife, a high school English teacher.
I married an English
And
teacher as well.
it helps. It helps.
It
And
does.
then, of course, I didn't know if anybody would read the first book, and fortunately they did. And by then the second book was written, so I was kind of off to a good start.
Well, marrying an English teacher is so. Did she ever correct any of your love letters and give them back to you, or is that just me?
Not too many love letters, but she's good to correct me. I'll tell you that.
That's great. All right. Well, that's good to have. I mean, really having a partner who's basically a first reader kind of situation. That's a great thing to have. Michael Ferris Smith has become a friend of ours, and we've done some projects together at the Institute. And he has said that he got good advice one time about writing, and it really stuck with him about how if you were sitting in a movie theater and you have to describe this scene, how would you describe it to someone sitting beside you? And it's changing, it's quick, and you can't just go on it. So he said that kind of mindset taught me an economy of words. It taught me a flow and seeing things cinematically. Do you subscribe to that? I mean, do you see your work as you're doing it cinematically like that?
Yes, and I think that that's the clue to really writing now, is to make each chapter almost the episode of a TV series that you want to binge. You want your character, you want to define your characters and develop your characters, and then make them make the plot sort of come out of how they would react to that. And I actually do watch television sometimes while I write, which is a no, you're not supposed to do that. But if I watch
What
a
shows?
mystery,
What do you watch?
anything that's bingeable, I'm out there.
Okay.
Outlander, anybody, I love it all. But sometimes that puts me in the mood and gets me going. And chewing a lot of bubble gum too while you write helps. Yeah.
All right, write that down if
Yeah.
you're looking for tips. Chewing a bunch of, well, let's get Vincent in here on the fun. Vincent, you've done, History is Lunch presentations. You love sharing history, and I love history. So I'm just delighted. My wife calls it pack rat, but I call it archival purposes. You have been diving into Jackson history, and you're working on things, and you've said you write history from below. So being a sociologist, that type of situation. Tell us what you mean by that, writing history from below.
Well, I have a PhD in social work from the University of Alabama, and my concentration there was social welfare history. My major professor, Dr. Paul Stewart, is at this time, and has been for years, the foremost social welfare historian. But the first semester I was in his class, Clark Chambers, who was the reigning dean of social welfare historians from the University of Minnesota, spoke to us. And he's the one who created the Social Welfare Archives, which I have used in researching social work history in Mississippi. But it was Clark Chambers who said, we write history from below, meaning we don't write what the official record says about welfare programs. We want to know what the people who actually received the welfare had to say about the program, how they interacted with social workers. So what I like to do is get down to the people who grew up in Jackson, not the people who ran the city, but the people who lived in those neighborhoods, and particularly in South Jackson, where we all kind of laughed about it. We were always looked down on back in the 50s and 60s when I was growing up. You know, you hear the other side of the railroad track. We were the other side of Highway 80. And people kind of looked down on us. And yet we knew we had a good thing there. I mean, people loved South Jackson who grew up there. And so I tell their stories, and it's my story too. I mean, well, like when I wrote the second book, Once We Crown Royalty, I acknowledged the importance of the old carnival ball. I even performed at it my sophomore year at St. Joe as a band member.
What instrument?
Baritone sax.
Baritone sax.
Okay. But I was never a part of that society thing, but I always enjoyed that it was there.
Right.
And that this was Jackson with so many great things, but that we had our things down in South Jackson. We're the guys who snuck down to Elton Woods hunting on Saturday morning, hoping the landlord didn't catch us.
So you could say as a musician, you had sax appeal. Okay, I'm sorry, please, just we're here all morning. One of the things in your latest book, so if you don't know, this is the story of Belle, who is a teenager growing up in Jackson during the Civil War, and those of you that don't know, Jackson became known as Chimneyville because of it burned down and all that's left are chimneys. I remember Chimneyville Smokehouse, and only later did I learn the true meaning of what Chimneyville was. But this is a fascinating look of a young person's perspective. I've taught junior high school, teaching at Mississippi College now, and young people's perspectives. It's always interesting, and some things never change. But talking about the history from below and a just kind of an ordinary citizen's perspective, but sometimes they also are relating to things like this. I love this line. Closer to home, Mayor Charles Manship posted handbills throughout the city, urging residents to take arms and turn back the barbarous. Failing to take his own advice, Manship fled the city. And I'll make no further editorial comment on mayors or anything there. But looking at things from other people's point of view, and I've heard you in interviews with talking about this because I was just in the Emmett Till session before this, and there are so many aspects of history, so many good things about Mississippi, so many horrendous things about Mississippi history. And this is not a book that you are trying to lift up a certain viewpoint or something. You're just, as a historian, giving the viewpoint of Belle. Tell us what drew you to this.
Well, I have to say that manuscript of Belle's, a 10-page type manuscript by her son, literally fell in my lap at Primo's in Flowood. When Doug Shanks and I had finished One Direction Home, A History of South Jackson, I began work on the Once We Crown Royalty, tales of downtown and West Jackson. Doug just had this idea of writing this story of Samuel Alfred Beadle, who was a Reconstruction lawyer in Jackson and also a poet. Well, my good friend Larry Nelson Allen, who was an avid collector and who provided a lot of things for me for my first two books, happened to have a copy of Samuel Alfred Beadle's book Reflections, a book of poetry. And so he met Doug and me at Primo's, and he had this manuscript, the Civil War Diary of Belle Daniel, and I asked where he got that, and he said, an estate sale. And I said, well, let me look at it. And then when he was about to leave, I said, can I borrow this? I might get an article out of it. He said, sure. And I got fascinated by it, and I started reaching out to see if I could find any descendants, and found friends of the descendants who contacted me but never could get descendants to. And then out of the clear blue sky, I got a call from the secretary of the School of Social Work at Jackson State. These two women are looking for you. They said you did a presentation on one of their ancestors. I said, well, give me their number, I'll call. And that's what led to this. That very day, I had this picture. One of the great granddaughters sent me the picture and several other pictures. And suddenly this whole project was reborn. I thought I can get a book. Belle actually has a granddaughter. I mean, not a great, she has great granddaughters and great great granddaughters, but she actually has a granddaughter still living. And she lives in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I visited her last year. And you know, the whole thing just really just took off. It was really great.
And that's that with the documentary work and things that we've done, you go into something, I know Walter Anderson, and then you discover all of these things, or I know a good bit about Eudora Welty, and then you just explore and you dive in. And it's different, Ken Burns, one time they were asking him about his process, and he said, well, here's the thing. Steven Spielberg and I do the same things. Ken Burns said, Steven, and I both tell stories. Stephen can just make shit up, is what Ken said, and I can't. So as a historian, you're stuck with this. Darden can handle making things up, but what I love about both of the panelists here is, Darden is also setting things right here in Mississippi. So here's a reference to I have a dinner appointment at Walker's, and and I like reading books that I know where that is, or I know who he's alluding to there. So Darden, Vincent, we're going to just jump back and forth here, but Darden, everybody asks about. And ladies and gentlemen, Gene Luckett, the wonderful Gene Luckett just came in. I love Gene Luckett. Darden, when you are in your process, everybody always asks about, well, where do your ideas come from? And I hate that question because it's not about that. It's about the work you do after the idea gets there. Tell us about your process of showing up day after day, word after word, and getting that and fleshing that out. And then there's a certain point where you want the smelly thing to just go away, but you've got to finish it, shepherd it through to production, even though you're getting new ideas for new stories. Tell us a little bit about your process of bringing these thrillers to the page.
For Rooftop, I wanted to do a trilogy, or realize as I started the book that it could be a trilogy of my character Diana Bratton, who was introduced in Wiggle Room, and then in the 5 Manners of Death, she sort of becomes the main character, the main protagonist. So I had toyed with the idea of a medical practice where the spouse of one of the doctors dies. And did that spouse have anything, or did that doctor have anything to do with the death of the spouse? So I had brought in a new character who was actually Diana Bratton's surgical partner, a female doctor in her practice who's new. And if you read 5 Manners of Death, you'll kind of understand why she joined that practice. But her husband is just surprisingly shot from a rooftop. And of course, shooting from rooftop has been a subject in the last few days, very unpleasant. But again, we are fiction, and if you're writing Southern fiction, you talk about, or Southern Gothic fiction, you talk about unpleasant subjects like murder. So once Diana is faced with deciding if this doctor is guilty, should she help prove her guilty, or should she save her from death row? So I worked that subject of a spouse of a doctor dying, and throwing some suspicion on that doctor into the book, and that's something I'd wanted to write for a while. So Rooftop is what I came up with.
And I love some of your names. Von Seal. I knew a Von Seal growing up.
Okay.
And I mean, how Southern is that?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And being able to capture that. Listen at some of this. So Diana, she gets in her car, and there's someone in her car, and that's one of my big fears. And you'll see it in movies sometimes, and I'm always scared that that's going to happen. I'm always scared when it does happen. But Diana stole a glance in the rearview mirror. He was a Caucasian, thick blonde eyebrows peeked out of a 3-hole ski mask. Like what you see, doctor? He laughed. We could take a go at it in the back of this baby. I hate to disappoint you, but that's not what I'm here for. He relaxed the pressure of the gun barrel against her neck and leaned back slightly in the seat. Diana thought about the tiny can of mace dangling from her keychain. What is it you want? We don't keep narcotics in the building either. Don't want any of that. And the janitorial service will be here any minute, so you better. And I thought you medical people were smart. So this goes on and on. But he says, certify my Uncle Roy as a wacko. So he's trying to get her to do something. And she's like, he saw the therapist, but she's not a psychiatrist. And the young man stroked the back of Diana's head and the right side of her neck, this time with a gloved hand that felt like leather. You can make it happen, Doc. I know you can. And if you do, you'll never see me again. I can't. I won't falsify medical records, Diana said, for any reason. You ain't no different from nobody else, and you don't know what you'll do till you have to. He ran the tip of the barrel against the back of Diana's neck and popped her between the shoulders with his fist. She jerked forward toward the steering column. The shoulder strap of the seatbelt caught her. This afternoon in your office with no one around, I saw all the pictures on your desk. That cute girl, nice cheerleader outfit, fits snug. She's feeling out good. Get away from me. Diana reached for the door handle. You're not getting anywhere near my daughter. The man lunged forward with a chokehold. He wore long sleeves. Diana could see the tips of the leather gloves. You do what I say, but if you don't, I'll be back, and it will hurt. That's pretty good. Okay, so now y'all got to go by that and see what happens. So all right, so writing thrillers. I'm trying to picture going from gynecology to writing thrillers, but you have written some female protagonists here. So does your day job inform your writing?
I do not keep patients waiting in the lobby while I'm writing books. I want to be sure.
That's what y'all are waiting on.
I do not do that.
Finishing a chapter.
But I have been told that I do write women well, and that is, but that's what's great about being an artist or a writer or anything. You can put yourself into someone else's body. You can make someone else into something else. So I do think I can and write women characters well. And I wanted to have a strong female character in Dinah Bratton. And you picked a passage where she is accosted herself with a gun, and you have to put your protagonist in peril. So she's a sort of a modern Southern Belle in peril.
Which is great. I know y'all want to go read it now. So,
Sure.
And you advocate reading your manuscript out loud.
Yes, in fact.
And you've got audiobooks
Yes.
of just about all of your.
Yeah, we have the first 5 in audiobook on Audible. But it's wonderful hearing somebody else read the book, because if you write, you kind of forget what you've written. And again, when you're finished with the editing process, you really want to you're ready to go.
Right.
You want to get rid of it. So to hear somebody else read it is really exciting. But I have found that if you do read your book to yourself and actually pretend you're doing the audiobook, it really lets you hear what those characters would really sound like to someone else who's listening to it or reading it.
And how much
you find
revision do you do
imperfections.
on that?
Tons of revision.
Yeah.
And you do have to not be afraid to delete something, toss something, put it in a file, use it later. But that is very helpful to read it out loud. And it took me a while to learn that.
So those of you taking notes in your hymnal, chew bubble gum, watch TV, and read out loud. So all right, that's good. All right, Vincent. One thing that I loved in your book, you're describing a passage of Belle and comment she's getting from this invading Union Army in Jackson. I interviewed someone at Mississippi College this week, a 92-year-old. She grew up across the street from the college. So we're interviewing her about the property. During World War II, she was a teenager, and she would walk through the campus to go to the Old Town Clinton, which was Newtown Clinton at the time. So she's walking across there. The Navy was on campus because all the boys had gone to war, had about 12 students at MC, and so the Navy was using a dormitory there. She said, so this lady I interviewed, she said she remembered the sailors whistling out of the window at her and making comments. And I said, Miss Pat, what did your mama say about that? She said, I don't believe I told my mother, but I thought it was wonderful. And I just love that. Belle has a very different experience in the passages that you recount.
Well, you have to understand, Belle encountered both Confederate and Union soldiers, and she naturally thought that the Confederates were superior in terms of manners. The Union soldiers, on the other hand, would say things like, hey, come on, let's have a drink. Or they'd walk by her singing, I wish I was in Dixie, giving some very suggestive remarks. And it was a really funny line in her book. She said, they must mistake us for those masculine women they have at home. How she differentiated between the Southern Belle and Yankee women. Um, the funny thing is, Belle's son, the one who transcribed her diary, became a career military man in the Army. One day he's watching his battalion in a parade, and they have all the streamers of the campaigns they participated in. One was Vicksburg, which, Jackson was part of the Vicksburg campaign. So suddenly he's watching his battalion wondering, was it soldiers of my own battalion who 70 years ago insulted my mother in the streets of Jackson, asking her to have a drink with them? So you had those kind of dynamics, and her own son having to face, wow, my own battalion historically had that behavior.
Right.
I tell you another thing too. I was speaking to a good friend of mine who's one of the commanders of a local Sons of the Confederate Veterans. Now, I will say up front, I'm not a neo-Confederate, and my own politics are left of center. But I took Belle in a sympathetic look because, it was a teenage girl going through all of this. I said to a friend of mine, who, like I said, who's a commander with the Sons of Confederate Veterans, Southerners were the ones who defended William Calley more than any other part of the nation, saying American soldiers don't do that. And yet, for years, we complained we were the only Americans who ever got treated like that because of the Union soldiers. And the former head of the Mississippi Archives and History and former president of USM, W.D. McCain, wrote in his story of Jackson in 1953 how the actions of the Union soldiers who invaded Jackson in 1863, some of the worst behavior ever by military men. So I think Belle experienced that. And another thing is when her sister became so overwrought and fainted on the gallery and they all screamed, Union soldiers went to see what was going on. And when they saw, they began laughing and cheering that a Southern girl, a Southern Belle, had passed out from the horrors that they were going through. So Belle was living through that, and so was her family.
And had some very strong comments to make about that because, and here she is again, the contrast between that and the romantic ideas that she had about the Southern soldiers and the ones who had visited with her at her home before leaving to go fight in Vicksburg and that sort of thing. And one thing that I didn't think of, I think about like a siege of a city or an army invading a city as a one-time thing, but it really wasn't. The Union Army comes in, and then they go fight in Vicksburg, and then they come back, and there's another siege to the city. It's an ongoing thing, and you've got these people caught in the midst of this. And one passage that I really found interesting was when when Belle and her family realized that her aunt and uncle have left their home because they were going to see about staying with them. And she's basically says, they didn't even say goodbye. and it made it very human about everyone scurrying around and what do we do?
The home where her aunt stayed would probably buy somewhere around the King Edward Hotel. That was West Jackson, or the very end of West Jackson. I really got into the landscape. And my friend Derek Barron, we've known each other since we're small kids, a photographer, and we took pictures of many of the historical markers so we can show Belle's routes of escape. And the most telling of it was when she had to escape for the siege, and she took 4 younger siblings and 4 slave children. That escape route would have been behind the zoo, which didn't exist at that time, but the railroad tracks along there, and eventually made their way to Bailey's Lake. But I just see it as Belle, it was a thing of survival. Yeah, Belle was courageous and all that, but she was a teenage girl trying to take care of 8 small children. And try to get them to safety. And I tried to concentrate on those things. And the first night, they hadn't made it to Bailey's Lake yet. They settled at another lake. I can't identify where that is, 'cause it's probably been filled in. But this was really one of my to me, one of the most touching things in her memoir. We sat and, when we watched the horizon and there was these, orange colors and stuff, we knew those were houses burning. All we could do was sit there and wonder whose houses are they?
Right.
Turned out one of them was hers.
Yeah.
Um, but it was, I mean, I really wanted to capture what, as a teenage girl, she had to go through, taking on an adult role and taking care of all these kids and getting them to eventually Bailey's Lake. And I'd like to say too, I had a hard time finding a reviewer for this book. And I think a lot of people were afraid of it because of the subject matter, a Confederate girl diary type thing.
Right.
Finally, a friend of mine, hearing that I had that problem, called and said, from New Orleans, said, "I'll review the book for you. This guy's further to the left than I am." And I'm, like I said, I'm very left of center. And he said, I'll do the review. But one of the things he wrote in the review that he felt I should have pointed out, that yes, Belle was taking care of getting these slave children to safety, but they were her father's property, and I should have pointed out
Right.
that this was wrong.
Yeah.
And I said, well, some things are just kind of obvious. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of like, the Huns invading cities in the, early history and attacking people. I don't have to say it's wrong because that's sort of implied. But I told him if he feels that's a glaring omission on my part, he's really got a responsibility to say it. But I just wanted to point out that Belle was a person, and that she was a teenage girl. And we talked about history from below earlier. There's another historical concept that my major professor taught me, and that's presentism. We can't judge people from the past by today's standards.
Right.
And that's, whereas I certainly do not approve of things that happen. I mean, we're looking at people, and I tried to point this out in the book. This is a conversation with a girl who lived 160 years ago.
Right.
And who was 18 at the time. It's not like talking to an 18-year-old girl today.
Well, and what struck me when I read that review, because I did go read that, and one of my thoughts is, first of all, she does have all these children she's dealing with. No wonder you just had 10 pages of manuscript and transcription to work from. If I'm taking care of 8 children, I don't have time to sit down and write as well. So I took that into account when I was reading that you're working with a very limited piece. So, but again, there are other books, there are other things to explore, and that's what I love about this. Again, with Eudora or whomever or whatever documentary we're working on, you find and you discover, and then you go down this rabbit trail, and then you find a wealth of material. And that's what I love, is that this isn't your last book. You're already working on future things, and we're going to get to that in a minute. All right, Darden. All right. So reading like a local, writing like a local. You've done it. All right. Is this the 7th book?
7th.
All right.
Published, yes.
All right. How many of y'all have written 7 books? Come on. I mean, that just the fact of finishing something, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, just the fact of following through. I know how hard it is to shepherd a book through production to get it done. And yes, publishing has changed, and there are a lot of, there are more publishers, there are more books being published now than ever in the history of the world. If you write your book, you can either publish it yourself or you can do print on demand. I mean, there are avenues with people who are out here, and we've been giving them these tips. You just did it, and people have accepted your books and love them, and publishers publishing and awards. What encouragement would you give to would-be writers in today's climate, and like, well, nobody's reading, lots of people are reading. How would you encourage writing as a local? How would you encourage others and them telling their stories?
Well, first of all, it's not easy, but it's been said that everybody has at least one book in them. And I think that's true. And if you think you have a story, you should sit down and write it. It's so easy to do that. You've got your phone, you can make notes, you can dictate to your phone. It's not that you're beginning a novel or short story or nonfiction work from the beginning that's going to be finished in a couple of days. It's going to be an ongoing process, but take notes and start it. But I do think the secret to really being a true author for the long term is that you've got a second book and you've got a third book in them. And, you don't want to be a one-hit wonder, but you also want to decide, why are you writing? And someone asked me this early on in my career. They said, are you writing to entertain people? Are you writing to leave something for your grandchildren? Or you just don't have enough to do, or whatever? But I decided I wanted certainly to write something that people read. And, I fortunately have something else to do for a living, which is good if you're a writer, for sure. So don't quit the day job, as they say. But I do think that you'd have to decide why you want to do it. Are you entertaining yourself or entertaining other people? And my goal is certainly a satisfaction that I get out of producing a book, a beginning, a middle, and an end with an idea for something next, but also to have somebody read it and to see a review published by somebody you certainly don't know, or to have somebody see you on the street or meet you at church and say, oh, you're the author, and that kind of thing. And I think that's great, and I really enjoy that. But I do think that you have to decide, are you going to make a commitment to it, just like Vince has, and you're going to keep going with it,
Yes. Absolutely. And meeting people and that encouragement, that is wonderful, but you started and you completed things without having that.
Yes, but I do want to say there are so many resources now. There are so many podcasts you can listen to free about writing. I mean, there's several that I listen to in the car. I get something out of every one of them. Of course, these people want you to buy their writing book. They want you to come to their workshop, but they give a lot of very, very good free information that, they didn't invent it. They've just taken somebody else's take on how to develop characters or how to do plot and put their spin on it. But I get something out of every one of those that I listen to, and I would encourage you to do that. There are, various online workshops you can take. That's one of the very few good things that came out of COVID. It started a lot of Zoom type workshops and things you can do now. So there are really a lot of resources, and there is a method to the madness. There is a way you're supposed to write. And once you do get that honed into your craft, it does make it a whole lot easier.
Well, I know Stephen King's On Writing was very influential to me early on. Well, it still is. Every once in a while, I had the audio book and I'd listen to that. I'd read the book. But his main message is your muse has to know where to show up, and you've got to have that appointment every day. So he gets up and he writes a certain amount every day, even if it's garbage. And he says, well, I at least have something to edit at that point. So it's getting something down. And I have so many friends who said, well, I would like to do a book, and I would like to do a book. Do it. There's no magic formula. It's just putting one word after another and getting that done. And then when you come across and you're having some success and having people enjoy your work, that's just gravy. But there's an incredible sense of accomplishment of just seeing your books in print. How do you explain to someone though that is not? Would you keep writing even if they're not being published at this point?
Yes, I think you would keep writing manuscripts, because when you finally make it, it's nice to have a few in the bank. But I think I would, like I mentioned earlier, I was fortunate enough that people, read my first book, House Call, and liked it, that it kept me going. And I think I would still keep writing, but I'm still counting on some people out there reading the books. But there is a sense of self-satisfaction that you were able to complete it. My mother, we mentioned earlier, was a retired English teacher, and she was a big fan. But when she read some of my early manuscripts, she said, I like it, it's great, Darden, but you need to get somebody else to read it because, obviously I'm your mother. But she would tell me she had met somebody at Bridge Club, and they said, oh, your son's the author. And she said, oh, but he's also a very good doctor, has a very big practice. So she was, afraid that,
She's gonna qualify.
yeah, I wasn't going to quit being a doctor, and I've jokingly said anybody can go to medical school, but not everybody can write a book.
That's great.
Right.
Okay, now Vincent, it's time for questions, and here's what I'm interested in, because on the front row here are two of Vincent's sisters. So we're going to open up the floor for questions for everyone, but I've got to see what questions the sisters have for Vincent. So either one of you. Which one of us is your favorite? That is great.
Teresa.
He said Teresa, who apparently is not here. That's great. Do you have a question? Are you going to write about us ever?
I'm not sure.
He may have already written about you, you just don't realize it.
That's right. I had my English teacher at the Math and Science School, Emma Richardson, who I dedicated my part of Eudora to. She used to say, all fiction is autobiography and all autobiography is fiction. And I think y'all think on that later, and it'll come to. I mean, but it is. I think that's true. There's some of you, Vincent, in everything that you're writing, and your experience and how you see the world.
Well, I was, of course, in the first book, South Jackson. I mean, I grew up there, but even in the book about Belle, it's sometimes, like I'm following her as she's taking those kids on that escape route, and hoping she's going to make it. I mean, it's just like, wow, I really feel something for her going through this. And Larry Nelson Allen, who provided the start for this with having purchased the memoir at an estate sale and letting me use it. Yeah, he found her grave in Hattiesburg and told me how to get to it. And next time I was in Hattiesburg to see grandkids, I went to see that. And when I took her grave, and in fact, that's the last picture in the book, is her tombstone. And he asked me, "Did you talk to her grave?" I said, "Yeah, of course I did, because the people I write about, they become dear to me."
Right.
And I asked him, "Did you talk to her?" He said, "Well, of course I did." So those of us who go out and collect these old things, write about these old things, they become special to us. And so people might think I'm a little crazy talking to a tombstone, but I wrote about this woman for several months. I followed her story. I had to say something.
Well, let's see. How many of you think he's crazy? No, okay. No. The sisters do. Okay, other questions? Come on, you've got some. Yes, sir.
Those moments, how do you get in that WRITE, right state of mind, and talk about that thing, writer's block, if it is or not, how do you guys work around that?
Writer's block and getting in the right, WRITE, state of mind. I'm saying that for the video.
Well, all right. I was the associate provost at Mississippi Valley State University at the time I retired. And I was, when we went through SACS accreditation, I was put over the QEP, or Quality Enhancement Program, whatever that was. It's so many years now. But ours was creative writing. So I worked with students on writing, and the mentor I had said, you have to let them do free writing. Just let them just sit there and scribble, whatever, and then let something come out of it. And so I did find that worked for them somewhat, but for me a lot. I just sit down and I just start typing and go back and look. Yes, this is okay. I can move this around here, or I can just throw this part out. So you just have to write. It's kind of like, you may not really, if you're mowing the yard, you may not really be into it, but you got to start pushing that mower, and eventually you're going to get it done, right? Well, in a way, I find that with writing. And yeah, it's just something I enjoy doing. So that helps a lot.
So Darden, if you're sitting there and your patients are waiting on you and you've got writer's block and you're trying to get something so that you can finally go see your patients, what do you do?
Well, sometimes, like Vince said, you just sit down and you write something, and it may not be anything that you keep, but at least you have accomplished something that day. But you can also work on your book in other ways, getting ready for go to the book festival and things like that. But again, sometimes going out and talking to people, and just hearing what they have to say gives you an idea of somehow putting that into your book. And so be careful if you see me in a party. If you tell me something, it might happen. And I'm an only child. I don't have any sisters or brothers to draw on. You know, you absorb the world around you, and it's a good way to put. It's a fictional way to put your take on what you see, and I think that's fun.
Well, and I think Eudora Welty the same way. She, you know, she drew upon the people around her, but she wasn't doing a caricature of someone or specifically trying to make it into this person. But every bit of these relationships informs your sensibility, and you start writing a character and you're making Diana a real person. All of this experience that somebody asked me, Anthony, how long did it take you to do that painting? And I will say 1 hour and 53 years, because all of my life experience goes into that. And when a doctor, you say, I see them for 10 minutes and he charges all this money. No, he saw you for 10 minutes and he studied for 10 years or longer. So it's that kind of situation to me, is that it is, once again, showing up, putting in the work. And all of these things are examples of lots of hard work. And then we get to enjoy it. So other questions? James, you got a question back there?
If you haven't read any of your works, in what order would you recommend?
Well, like I mentioned, Rooftop is a trilogy, but by definition, it's a standalone novel. So you do not have to read the other 2 preceding books, although I hope you will. So really, you don't have to read them in order. You know, someone's writing style changes as the years go by. Perhaps maybe read the newest one, Rooftop, but you do not have to pick them in order. But please read them all in some way, or listen to them. And I did want to add, as far as writing and composing or putting a novel together, it is easier if you outline it. I do not, although the book I've just started, I'm going to make myself outline it, because I want to see if that's going to be easier when you finish. And even if you can come up with the first sentence of each chapter or something like that, at least it gives you something to go to when you do have writer's block.
Very interesting. I'm kind of surprised that I'm taking a picture here. Y'all smile, and then everybody else here smile. What a good group. Okay. We live in an age where we're having to do social media. And if you guys haven't seen Darden's website, you need to go check that out. It's a fantastic website. It's got a lot of good things. Okay, so Vincent, tell us about the order of books. The question, what should they read first?
I think it depends on what your interest is in. I mean, I wrote the South Jackson book with Doug Shanks, and I wrote the West Jackson and Downtown book second. And then I wrote Belle third. It's just whichever one you're interested in. I mean, you might not be interested in South Jackson, but you might be interested in what a teenage girl went through during the Civil War.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
I'd like to say something too in response to what Darden said a few minutes ago about, you know, when he goes places, people recognize him and he's a writer. I have to say this to him because he's a doctor, and to my good friend George Patton, who's back there, is a doctor. I was in for my annual prostate exam a couple years ago, and the nurse came and said, Mr. Venturini, we need to see you up front for a minute. So I went up there. When I came back, these people, are you the guy who wrote South Jackson? I said, oh, yes, I did.
That's the exact setting you hope to be recognized in. I'm just hoping someone will recognize me during this visit. That's
that people who go to get prostate exams also read.
That's good. And that's the good thing in Mississippi. I mean, how wonderful is this Mississippi Book Festival? How wonderful that we can have this. But the plethora of Mississippi writers, you know, and somebody said, well, why did you do Eudora? Well, we have some personal connections with Eudora, but there are other stories we want to tell. Absolutely. And everybody, the age-old question, how come there are so many writers in Mississippi? I mean, look at all the characters around. I mean, we just have interesting things, and they say that in the North, you know, if they have this backwards kind of relative, they hide them away or put them in an asylum. In the South, we put them on the front porch, you know, and celebrate them. So we have wonderful stories. We have wonderful things to tell.
Yeah, it reminds me, and I think it was Flannery O'Connor, maybe Gene can verify this, but someone, I think it was Flannery O'Connor, who was asked, why do you Southern writers write so much about freaks? And she said, because we can still recognize them.
Right.
That's good.
We have a lot to explain.
We do. Other questions?
Question, two-part question. Number one, there, this teenage girl I was writing about, does it go on farther with what happened to her after the Civil War?
Yeah, I relied upon various things. A letter that her great-granddaughter sent me that she wrote to her son Richard, who was on a ship at sea, about what happened to, where she was married, which is actually in South Jackson, and some of what happened afterward. Also, newspapers.com that Belle actually won a $3 prize at the state fair for her crayon work, and stuff. So
Is that the first you found out that she was an artist?
No, actually, her granddaughter, the daughter of the man her son who wrote transcribed the diary, talked about how my father said she was also not just a wonderful mother, but a wonderful writer and a wonderful artist. And her great-granddaughter sent me a picture, and it's in the book.
It's in the
of,
book.
Artwork she did and stuff. So I just followed through, and it was really touching to me because Belle was a lifelong Episcopalian, and she died in Hattiesburg, and she was still active with the Episcopal Church, and they canceled the meeting the morning after she died because they just felt we can't have a meeting. Belle's gone now. I thought that was something. But what really troubled me, and I actually end the book with this, was, this woman had done all these things, but she's remembered in the Hattiesburg paper as an aged woman. And that, and I found too, in a later newspaper accounts, women did not count much then. They were basically their husband's wives. They were Mrs. So-and-so, and I thought, what this woman had been through. She raised, she had several children, 4 of them died, and she kept family together. She was a horticulturalist. I mean, did all these things. And all the newspaper can say was, an aged woman dies. I thought, that sucks.
Yes, sir.
I know a lot about the American Civil War, and I want to ask a military question. And by the way, I'm not a lawyer, so pointed that out. I'm pointing it out that I'm very concerned. Does she, by any chance, mentions the fact that Johnson's over here with 20,000 troops and he moves to Canton? He never defended his city. What I'm getting at is he never participated in the Vicksburg campaign. He was a horrible Confederate general, in my opinion. Now she's trying to save herself and her family. Does your book get into any of the military aspects?
Yes, but more from, looking at the works of Mikowski and Woodruff. Johnston did not want to be in Mississippi. Johnston felt he should have had Robert E. Lee's position, that he was a higher ranking official when the war started. But also, I think that I detected in Belle, when she was so sad after Vicksburg fell and she found that relatives had died, was it worth it? And I think she began to maybe wonder, did we really defend this that well? One thing I was proud to get in this book was a cartoon from Harper's Magazine, 1863, right after the Battle of Fredericksburg, when Lady Liberty or Columbia is scolding Lincoln. What happened to so many sons murdered at Fredericksburg? Lincoln said, that reminds me of a joke. She said, go tell your joke at Springfield. See, Lincoln had to have a success at Vicksburg. He had to get it. The North took Vicksburg more seriously than the South did, to be honest. Also, Lee was asked to go to Vicksburg to help with the defense, and he declined. Oh, by the time I got there, it'd be over. Well, it wasn't. I mean, it would have taken maybe a month. The thing was still going on. The South did not take defending Vicksburg that seriously. And the fact of the matter is, Johnston and Lee and all that bunch of Virginians, to them, they saw the war from a Northern Virginia perspective. And when the North took Vicksburg and split the Confederacy in two, and then simultaneous to that, Lee lost Gettysburg. I mean, we held on for 2 years, but it was over. It really, all we did was lose more people.
Well, one of the things I liked about what he did was because he does allude to some of this periphery, but it being her point of view, really sticking with that because there are very well done books on the Jackson campaign and the siege and all of that. So, and I also like that you include your references and also people can find those. We're running real low on time. What's next, Vincent?
Well, I just want to say that Belle's granddaughter bought 50 copies of the book as soon as it came out to send the family. And she said, I didn't think you could do this, but you managed to tie her story to history and stuff. And I was thought,
Imagine.
if I don't sell another book, just that compliment
That's
made it all
that's
worthwhile. But my history of social work, is what I'm concentrating on right now.
Okay.
And I've been asked by a friend to contribute a chapter to his book on Mississippi history. And I wrote a review of the newly released textbook high school students will be using, and it'll be in tomorrow's paper. So you don't generally write reviews of textbooks, but I convinced the lady that, hey, we ought to let Mississippians know what's being taught in Mississippi history.
Well, I was trying to find an article. Michael Fair Smith had an article on the cover, and I was trying to find a physical copy to get to him. And Kroger sells newspapers, so if you're hunting a physical copy, Kroger sells them. So pick up a paper tomorrow and read Vincent's article. So glad you're keeping on and going to continue. Darden, what's next for you? Are you doing another trilogy? What's next?
I have an unpublished manuscript, The Friendly Enemy, which is finished and just looking at some publishing options for it. And I've started a new novel, Party Crashers, which will be a follow-up to Party Favors, which was the book that came out before Rooftop. And really want to explore those characters and maybe move him to the Mississippi Delta where I'm from. Somehow figure that out.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, guys, look, we're going to be over there at 12:15. So both of these guys will have books. They've got copies of our Eudora book over at Lemuria and the other booksellers. Please support your local authors. It's worthwhile, and we want to see these guys keep writing. What's next for you? We have a Bill Dunlap documentary in the works. We have a Faulkner project that we're teasing out. We have some different television series where all these interviews with John Grisham and all these folks we've done for these films. We're taking these long interviews that we wound up using 2 sentences. We're taking those and editing those into some 30-minute programs of just a conversation with Grisham and Napier's and that sort of thing. So lots of things. Look us up at the Institute for Southern Storytelling at MC. We got some good things ahead. Please give this panel a round of applause. Good job.